Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Adjusting Your Finances for Retirement Living program. Mr. Emerson Hartzler, pro bono financial advisor, will lead us in this program and will present this program to us, and you will learn something absolutely wonderful today. Mr. Hartzler, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me share the screen here and get to, So by way of background, I had a career of 44 years in business and industry as an executive, did a lot of things financially at the corporate level, but had no experience at all whatsoever in personal finance, except doing my own thing. And so I retired in August of 2007, almost 15 years ago. So at least I have 15 years of experience of being in retirement and some planning for that. I was lucky enough to be able to join a group of certified financial planners back in 2007 who tutored me on the whole process of financial planning. I was in their office for the first 8 years and then have my own practice since that point in time. And I'm not a certified financial planner. I do pro bono work exclusively, never charge anybody anything for the work I do. And most of the work I do is preparing people who are not terribly financially successful and getting their ducks in a row, getting their finances adjusted so that they can enjoy retirement. Everybody has different goals for their life, but almost exclusively, everyone looks at one of their primary goals as saying, I want to retire with dignity, be able to outlive, have my money outlive me rather than the other way around. So I get to work with people with those kinds of objectives and help them along their way. During this 15 years, I've worked with a little over 350 families, follow about 50 of them on a month-to-month basis still. And this subject is one of the important ones that we discuss all the time. So that's kind of the background. And so with that in mind, I want to make a personal confession. I started getting really serious about looking at this whole financial situation for retirement living when I was in late 50s. And that's about 15 years too late. I engaged a CFP, certified financial planner, to help me with that process when I was 65, which is really not the right way to go. And we'll talk about more of that later in the process, but of the presentation. But if you are 40 or older and have not developed a relationship with a certified financial planner, I would highly recommend you do so, because as we'll see in this presentation, starting early is better than starting late. So that's by way of background. And I thought in putting this presentation together, I thought back about what kinds of things I've gone through in my life, the kinds of issues that I've worked with these 350 people over the last 15 years, and there's some common threads. And you may have other issues here in addition to what we're going to talk about. I wouldn't doubt it at all, but I think at least you can relate to these 9. So there's a good news and bad news. The good news is, given our society, our availability of safe drinking water and any of the other things we enjoy as citizens here in these great United States, we have a long life expectancy. And this chart, the JP Morgan chart, was, at first time I saw that, I said, it's really kind of amazing. And what this chart shows is, if you are 65 today, thinking about retirement, what's the probability that you will live to a specific age? So if you attain the age of 65 already, you're trying to do planning for your retirement years. Again, you're 20 years late in the process, but you start where you are. You have a 97% chance, if you are a couple, that one of you is going to live at least 10 years. Okay, well, that, we used 100 years ago, we had a life expectancy of 38 years. Well, now, it's 75 years. 15 years out, if you're a couple, you have a 90% chance of one of you still being around. And even in 20 years, at 85, 74, and in 25 years, almost half of us will still be around at that point in time. Now, I don't want to dwell on the subject, but these graphs show in purple life expectancy for women and in gray life expectancy for men. The gap is closing. It used to be 4 years, now it's 2, but unfortunately we're still have shorter life expectancies. But as a couple, those are the numbers. This is astounding. So the good news is, because of healthcare, because of our society, because of all the things we enjoy, life expectancy is getting longer and longer and longer. And so financial planners will say, let's look out 25, 30 years, because there's a good chance a lot of you are going to still be around at that point in time. So that's the good news. The bad news is we're going to live a long time. And if you retire at 65 or 70 or somewhere in that range, and you've got another 20, 25, 30 years to live without a full-time job, let's say, which would be the case in most cases, well, that's sobering. It's going to be a long time in retirement. So I worked 44 years full-time. My retirement years, I'm 15 so far. I won't make 44, but I may make 25 or 30. And so it's a sobering fact. So I went through my own experience, the experience of my clients over the last 15 years, and I picked out 9 decision points. Again, you may have others in addition to these. Some of these may not be important to you, but I think most people would agree these are important decision points, and we'll unpack each one of them in turn. At the age of 45 to 50, most people are empty nesters these days. Their life turns around a little bit. They have more. And so now the question is, what do I do about my lifestyle? What do I do about retirement savings? And again, these are kind of working against each other. The more I save, the less money I have for lifestyle and so forth. At 60 plus, there's a decision about long-term care insurance, and we'll unpack that a little bit later. And then also, how should I invest my retirement savings? And there's a lot of, I think, myths about that. We'll discuss that. But at 60, you start to really think about these kinds of issues. 62 to 70, of course, do I still need life insurance and long-term disability insurance, which are very important insurance plans during your working lifetime? And then when should I start taking Social Security? And this is not just a real simple answer. At 75 plus, now we get into some living arrangements. Should I downsize my home? Should I change living arrangements and so forth? And then when should I retire? And you say, well, that should be up here someplace, but we'll talk about what is retirement, what does it really mean. And then 75 to 85, should I consider a retirement living option? And there are lots of them out there. We'll unpack that a little bit. And then finally, at what point should I revisit my estate plan? Because that becomes more of an issue at that age group. So those are my 9 that I picked out, and we'll unpack them one at a time. So 45 to 50, most people today, and this is a good thing, kind of enter the empty nester phase. You have 2.5 children on average, I guess. We had 2. They went off to school, off to college. Both of them came back for a brief period of time. We tried to make life as uncomfortable for them living with us as we could. And they didn't like it either. So we helped them buy their own homes and got them off on their own. But the empty nester thing started in our mid 40s. And we did have more cash flow. I mean, we love our children. They've both become very responsible citizens of the world. We have a good relationship. They're doing just fine. But raising them was not cheap. It was very expensive, and getting through school and so forth. So we tried to save, we tried to put money into IRAs and 401ks, but it was tough. I mean, just costs a lot of money to live with a couple of children. Of course, large families really that have problems. But once you get to the empty nester stage, then the question is, well, okay, I should have more cash flow. Most people do. Now, what do I do with it? Well, there's some temptations here. And we have a term in the financial community called lifestyle creep. So there's a temptation to say, okay, I've got more money coming in, less expenses here, and so I'll just increase my lifestyle. And that's an option. And you say, well, you do have to enjoy life, right? But on the other hand, the clock now is starting to tick on retirement savings. So again, when we were 45 years old, we didn't have all that much in retirement savings, and it was kind of pedal to the metal at that point in time. And this is the time where I think at 45, if I'd have been smart, I'd have gotten really serious about getting with a certified financial planner and putting all this on paper and into a sophisticated model to see, not that we can predict what's going to happen 50 years out at age 45, but boy, planning for it, that's when it really should start seriously. And then we ended up with a 4-bedroom home with 2 people living in it. It didn't make a lot of sense. And we stayed in that state of condition until we were almost 70. So probably not a good decision, but that's what people find themselves. And you've got some decisions like, how about vacations? We can spend money on vacations, and I'm all for that. An active vacation while you can still be active is great. So these are all things that need to be put into a financial plan very early on. So you can see, well, how much can we really afford to spend on our lifestyle, of vacations, our home, and so forth, and how much do we need to start saving for retirement, because that's going to be a big deal. And then there's temptations. This is kind of humor here, but it's the Tesla I always wanted. And so you're tempted to go out and say, okay, fine, now I can go, whether it's the Tesla, it's a boat, it's whatever. My son wants to buy a boat. He's 58. Say, well, okay, that's great. Maybe that'll happen. But for me, it would be something like a Tesla. And then that introduces the concept of opportunity cost. And let me get out of this if I can. Oops. Yeah, there you go. Maybe I can. Maybe not. I apologize. Let me stop this. Okay. Sorry about that. And that introduces the rule of 72 and opportunity cost. So the rule of 72 is something you ought to be familiar with in terms of financial planning. And that says if you take the number 72, divide it by the rate of return that you could get on your retirement investments, okay, it tells you how many years it will take to double your money. So in the stock market, where I invest my funds, we'll talk more about that later, I expect to get about a 10% return. There are expenses. On average, I'm happy with 9. Well, if I get a 9% return on my investments, they're going to double every 8 years. And if I assume, and I've doctored this to come out with an even number, but if I assume that my investment years are 24 years before retirement, how many times will my money double if I'm earning 9%? Well, the answer is 24. So it doubles every 8 years. How many 8 years periods are in 24? There are 3. So I'm going to have 3 doublings in 24 years. So if I buy the Tesla for 50 grand, I think you can get a Tesla for 50 now, maybe a used one. What's my opportunity cost? Well, if I, instead of buying the Tesla, if I continue to drive my aging Odyssey and put that money in investments, how much money would I have 24 years later? Well, 400,000. So it doubles once, twice, 3 times, once, 100, 200, 400. So after 24 years, the 50,000 is 400,000. So what I tell people is, you think you're making a $50,000 decision. You're not. You're making a $400,000 decision. So again, time value of money, rule of 72, and it is a real deal. Let's see if I can get back here. Okay. And this is another slide you may have seen in your broker's office or in some financial office. And it talks about the rewards of being an investor in the time value of money. And it talks about the monthly growth of wealth of $1 invested in 1926 through 2019. I need to update this chart, but it's the latest one I had available. But if you took $1 in 1926 and held it for 96 years, you'd have somewhere in the stock market between $10,000 and $25,000. So it seems incredible. The point is, over time, and that's the issue, it takes time to do this, but over time, the capital markets have rewarded investors. There is a real opportunity cost of spending money. So that's the Tesla and the time value of money. The point is, there are lots of what ifs in that whole journey, and that's why you need to start planning and putting things down in a model to see where things are going with your finances very early. All right, so much for that. That's the empty nester stage. That's what I do 45 to 50 in terms of my planning and all the decisions I'm going to make year after year after year. When you get to be about 60, you got a couple of questions. Do I need long-term care insurance? And I live at Lakeview Village in Lenexa. It's a continuing care retirement community, and it has an element of long-term care insurance baked in. We did not buy long-term care insurance. Probably would have been better off had we done so. But most people say about 60, you need to consider that. It is the major insurance question for retirement years, because long-term care, nursing care, memory care, that sort of thing are generally not covered by other insurance plans, certainly not by Medicare, Medicaid. Well, Medicaid is, but that's another story. And the problem with this is you're probably not going to need it for a long time. I mean, most people don't really get in that situation until they're 80, 85 and so forth. Well, that's a long time from 60. But the rates increase rapidly as the time of need approaches. So if you say, I'm going to buy it at 60, well, what if I'll just wait until I'm 80? Well, the rates are going to be crazy at that point in time. And if you do have long-term care insurance, when you need it, you have a lot more flexibility of what you could do. We have people coming into our facility all the time with long-term care insurance. If I ask, I generally say, if it's a good policy, keep it, because if you need it, it will pay out. And most current retirees that I talk with who have a long-term policy are glad they have the long-term care policy. But that's an important one. It's a complex decision. Again, I'd recommend consulting with a certified financial planner to make that decision at 60 years. Okay, now here's a long story. We'll just spend a minute on it today. How should my retirement savings be invested? And one of the, very seldom, in my opinion, the government does us a favor. I'm almost a libertarian, as you might tell, but not quite. But there was one favor that the federal government did for us when I was still working, and that was to develop IRAs and 401ks, especially 401ks. It was a huge gift to the community, because what happened was people signed up for 401k, they put some of their money in, there were matching funds usually, and they chose some retirement option, some investment option. Hopefully it was a good one. And then what did they do? And the answer is absolutely nothing. Money just kept going in and kept being invested and kept earning things year after year. Maybe you got a statement at the end of every year or whatever, and you said, okay, fine, and you did nothing. Well, that's a wonderful way to invest money. And most of the time you were in the stock market and so forth. So now when you get into the 60 plus and you're thinking about retirement, and you consult with the gurus, they come up with rules of thumb, which I think are very misleading. One of the rules is the rule your age and 100. So you take the number 100, subtract your age from it, and that is the percentage of your investments that should be in stock market or something like that. 60% ought to be in a more safe investment. Well, I'm 80. I have basically 98% of my funds invested in stocks. So I've just blasted away from that rule of thumb. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the one size fits all is not the answer. Don't accept advice from someone who says, well, everybody ought to be doing this. Well, you're different and you've got a different plan. And so it's not a one size fits all. The planning horizon, again, may be longer than you think. So I'm 80, but I'll live a while, hopefully. I have some funds going to the next generation. They're in their 50s. I mean, so that money is a long range plan. So, and again, I think Elena, the Kansas City County Library System has this presentation exposing the myths of retirement investing. And that's kind of a teaser. I'm 100% invested in stocks, 10,000 plus companies through low cost mutual funds. But if you want to go and look at that presentation, it goes into a great detail of how you should invest your savings in your retirement years. And I encourage you to do that. This is a chart that is a teaser from that presentation, and it talks about the rates of return with various investment strategies. Over a 1 year period, this is stocks. You could make highest point during this period of time, 68 years, you got 47% in 1 year. Well, but there was a year you got minus 39, so very volatile. But over 5 and 10, 20-year periods, you have very little chance of actually losing money. Here's the real payoff. I'm invested totally in stocks over this period, which was a pretty good one for the stock market. 11% return on stocks on average per year. Historically, it's been about 10 plus. And if you took $100,000, 20 years later, you'd have 800,000. If you wanted into bonds, they're safer. Guess what? You just lost $500,000. So I'm not willing to give that up. That's the short course, but I'd encourage you to look at that presentation. Okay, 62 to 70. A couple of questions. Do I still need life and disability insurance, long-term disability insurance? In my case, I decided I didn't. I was worth more dead than alive. At this point in time, I didn't want to tempt my wife into anything nefarious. So we canceled our insurance during this period. We accumulated enough for retirement, and I didn't really need the insurance, didn't want to pay the premiums. And then if your retirement date is flexible, you've got enough money, you could probably drop the long-term disability insurance, although as long as you're having to work, this is just a critical insurance plan. So again, that's another consideration, and I'd encourage you to meet with a planner and go through that in detail for your own situation. But that 62 to 70 in that range, you're thinking about retiring, and those are a couple of questions there. Okay. When should I start taking Social Security? And this again is a really complex thing. There is a significant penalty for early payments. So if you opt in at age 62, you get a pretty good haircut by doing that. And so we had an interesting experience. I've always found the Social Security Administration people locally to be very knowledgeable and have information available. Some people have said they've had problems. I really haven't. I've gone to the office here in Overland Park a number of times, or I'm sorry, it's in Alexa, a number of times, and always gotten good advice. Well, when we turned, Marge and I, my wife and I are the same age. When we turned 62, we went to the office and said, how should we apply for your early benefits? And I said, I'm going to continue to work. My wife had retired, and they said, well, she should opt for early payments. I said, well, wait a minute, doesn't that, reduce what we'll get eventually? And they said, no, because what she's getting is less than 1/2 of what you will be getting. So she might as well get the benefits from 62 to 65 or whenever you retire. At that point in time, she automatically jumps up to 1/2 of what you've got, and you've just, gotten a windfall for 3 years. And I said, well, thank you very much. And that's exactly what we did. But that's a complex decision. Again, depends on who you are, what your situation is. For ours, it makes sense for her to take early Social Security benefits. I could have waited till I was 70 for a number of reasons. I opted at 65. I think it was 65 years, 7 months when I went through, but that's an important decision. 70 is really best if your life expectancy is greater than average. And every planner will tell you the same thing. Well, tell me when you will expire, and it will tell you when to take Social Security. And of course, no one can predict that. So it's kind of a gamble. But if you think your life expectancy is greater than average, you're probably better off waiting, if you can, to age 70 and getting a better benefit over a long period of time. Some of us have a bird in the hand philosophy. If I've got pretty good benefits at age 65, or now it's 66, I guess, let's go with that, because I'm going to get the next 4 years rather than giving them up. And there's some concern about the uncertain future of Social Security. I'm not terribly excited about that. I think for us who are already in retirement age, I think it's going to be pretty well protected. But changes will probably come to the younger group. So if you're a few years away from retirement, it might be a consideration. All right, then when should I retire? And I have a different philosophy on retirement. Basically, I retired in 2007. I was fully retired for 1 week. I went on a bicycle ride with a friend back in my home state of Ohio, went through my hometown, had a real good time for a week. And then I went back to work, but I went to work half-time doing pro bono work, so I didn't have to charge for it. It wasn't really a business. And it's something I enjoy, and I started out working half-time. And now I'm a little bit less than half-time, to be quite honest, but I'm doing what I want to do. And so I found this definition of work, which I really like. Work is doing what brings value to others, and usually they'll pay you for it, and joy to me. Doing what brings value to others and joy to me. So I enjoy work, I enjoy these kind of things, I enjoy counseling with people about their finances. I hope it brings value to them and to you, and it brings joy to me. So that's work, and I will continue to work until I absolutely cannot work anymore. And it's really from going from having to work to make a living to wanting to work. And you may get paid for part-time work, or you may not. May volunteer. It's wonderful, but you need a reason for getting up every day. This has nothing to do with your finances, but just having a purpose in life, whether it's volunteer work, it usually is serving other people, or working part-time, or doing something that brings value to others, and joy to yourself. That's great. And it, again, it's a very, very important financial decision, because in my case, where you started saying, well, I'm going to do pro bono work, I'm not going to get any revenue, that's a big deal. And you've got to adjust something to make sure that that's sustainable. Now, 75 plus, you get into these home situations, living arrangements. And many people really resist moving when they get into this age group. And I've worked in the continuing care retirement community space as a consultant for a number of years. I worked full-time for 5 years with the company that developed these kinds of facilities. So I'm fairly familiar with that industry. And when people market it, say, why don't you leave your home and come here, live in this community? As again, I say, I live in Lakeview Village, so I'm a little bit biased toward them. But there are many of those kind of facilities around town. But many people don't want to leave their home. And, there are pros for staying in your home. Well, they're familiar surroundings. You may be comfortable with your neighborhood. You get friendly neighbors, or you wouldn't be there. And you avoid the hassle of moving, decluttering. People say, oh my gosh, if I were to move, all the stuff I've got. And we didn't think we were hoarders, but it literally took a year for us to get rid of all the stuff so we could move from a 2,600 square foot 4-bedroom apartment to a 1,200 square foot, 2,400 square foot home, 4-bedroom home, to a 1,200 square foot apartment. It took about a year. So it is hassle. The cons are things like accessibility problems with the current home. I got a good friends about my age, and she had some hip problems, now walks with a cane, otherwise good health, but her home is built on a little hill, it's multi-story. How safe is it for her? She finally came to the point, well, I need to go to a different place. It's on one level. They don't have to go up and down stairways or walk up hills and so forth. So there may be some accessibility problems in the current home. It's really your safety issues. Maintenance of the property. I do a lot of budgeting for helping people do their budgets. I see a lot of property expenses. And normally people say, well, I can live in my home, and maybe it's paid for. All I have to do is pay the taxes and utilities and so forth. But then we track stuff every month in their budget, what actually happened, what are they really spending money on. We do it year after year after year. And you'd be surprised how often these large property expenses come out of the blue. Okay, several summers ago, we had a real dry summer. One of my clients had a basement that started cracking, and $30,000 later, she's got it fixed. Well, didn't anticipate that one. So staying in your home, may involve some expenses you don't really prepare for. And then again, if you do need additional care, you're not really able to live on your own, you're going to be forced to move, and you're not going to be able to choose an ideal time and place. These things generally happen in the most untimely manner. So it's something to consider if you want to plan to stay in your home at age 75 plus. 75 to 80 is usually when people will make those kinds of moves. And there are a lot of retirement living options. There are a lot of senior independent living, all the way from 55 plus to older adult. And the pros are you can avoid property maintenance. These are usually full maintenance deals. They're built for seniors, handicapped accessible, so forth. They're generally in quiet neighborhoods. Your neighbors are all of ilk, less problems than there will be noisy Harley motorcycles at night. I now have a very low powered electric motorcycle. It's very quiet. But again, the cons of just going into a senior independent living situation is if you need additional care, again, you're going to be forced to move again. We decided it wasn't worth 2 moves. We go directly to a CCRC from our independent living home. And then again, you're not able to choose the ideal time and place to move if you need those facilities. I like the CCRC. I'm clearly biased. The pros here is that all living arrangements are on one campus. We live independently in an apartment, but across the campus is memory care, dementia care, long-term care, short-term rehab, assisted living, anything you would need short of acute hospital care. And you're guaranteed access to all levels of care. The cons are you need to pass health and financial screens to qualify, because basically they're promising to take care of you for the rest of your life. And it is not inexpensive, and not everybody can afford it. So, but those are our options. And to break down the CCRC just a little bit more, there are even a couple of different kinds of those. One is basically a rental shop where you pay. Pros are you only pay for what you need. It's the Liberty Mutual ad, I guess. And you really have a lower cost initially because it's just based on independent living. The cons are that if you need assisted living, nursing care, and so forth, it's going to be at the going rate. So if you can afford to pay $300 a day, fine. Most people can't. And so going into a life care model packages the long-term care insurance really into that model. You have an unlimited healthcare guarantee. If you need these levels of care, it's going to be provided at the same rate basically you've been paying. It's a very predictable cost of living. So it's pretty easy for me to project out now what my living costs are going to be for the next 20 years because it's a lot of it's wrapped up in that. Cons are there is a sizable entry fee. The whole structure of this life care model is that people have home equity, and they're just trading that home equity for a lifetime lease and the ability have these higher levels of care at a guaranteed rate. But there are more contingent health and financial screens, obviously, because they're promising to take care of you and really throwing in a long-term care type of policy with that situation. So that's a very short course on that. I'll give you my email at the end of this presentation if you want to discuss any of these things in more detail. I'd be happy to do so. Again, I do a pro bono practice. I'm not trying to sell anything, so you'll never be charged for information. I may not be the best financial planner in the world, but I'm certainly the least expensive. And then finally, a word about your estate plan. This is something that involves your finances, certainly. And there's a couple of quotes from Ron Blue, who's kind of a very, very seasoned financial planner and is kind of a go-to person for financial planners. And he has a couple of quotes that says, you should love your children equally, but treat them uniquely. And we've kind of gotten into the point of saying, well, if I've got two children, I'm going to divide my estate equally between the two. Well, that may be fine. But, what if you have one of your children who is financially responsible and the other not? What if you have one of your children or grandchildren and so forth that has special needs and the other don't? This is something to consider. Again, if you'll start looking at these with a financial planner and bake that into your plans, there are ways of doing that. For instance, I have IRAs, my wife has IRAs, and we have a 401k, a Roth IRA. So we have regular IRAs and we have Roth IRAs. And we have some money going to our children, we have some money going to charity. We're in our financial plan, we're trying to move money into the Roth IRA to provide enough money to give to our children. Why? Well, because the Roth IRA has taxes already paid, and when they receive that benefit, they're going to get all that money and not have to pay taxes. The rest of the money that's given to charity, we're leaving in a regular IRA because the charity doesn't matter, it doesn't pay taxes on it. So there's those kinds of things that you can do to love your children equally, treat them uniquely, and have a plan that makes sense from a tax point of view and other reasons. And then another is do your giving while you're living so you're knowing where it's going. So if you do want to be charitable, and most people do, this is encouraging to say, well, let's give it away while you're living rather than just putting it in your estate. And well, that begs the issue, well, what can I afford? Now we're back to, again, the financial plan. And at some point in time, you can say, well, okay, what do I need to keep? So in my investments and so forth, so I'm not going to run out of money. I can support myself and my spouse through the rest of our lives. But if we have a surplus, what the heck? It is fun. It is joyful, I would say, to give while you're living, so you know where it's going. And then finally, I think this is the last slide. Choosing a financial planner. Again, I would encourage at any point in time. I wish I'd had one when I was 25, but certainly when you get to be age 40 and on, and I would recommend a CFP. These are people who are highly credentialed. They have to be a fiduciary, act in your best interest, and so forth. And it's not just putting together a plan; it's developing a close long-term relationship. Most planners, the people that I deal with, will do an initial plan and put a very sophisticated model. It'll project out what's happening over the next 30 or 40 years. Well, is that going to happen? No. But if you plan for it, and then every year you come back and now we know more than we did the year before, and so on and so forth. Or things happen in our lives that we didn't anticipate, and it's a trigger to go back and say, okay, now what do we do? How do we adjust our lifestyle, whatnot, to make sure this plan that we're working on actually comes to fruition? The best example I've heard is if you were going to drive a car from Kansas City to LA and it was going to take a week, you're going to kind of putter out there. If you waited till Friday to figure out where you were, but you found out you were in Texas, there's no way you're going to get there. But after day one, you find yourself in Oklahoma, you can make a course correction there. And that's the same way the financial plan. If you then look next year to say, well, am I on track or not? If not, what do I do now? to change things, invest more, whatever it takes to keep myself on plan. You just do that all the time. So you're replanning, at least annually, counsel during the intra-year or any significant changes, things you had anticipated, that you're much more likely to get where you are. And then just start the planning process early with them. So that's kind of my pitch. And I lied, this is the last slide. A lot of the work that I do, and I'd be happy to, I do have more capacity. I'd be happy to take on new clients. I'd be happy to find people that could work with me and do what I'm doing in retirement. So if you're in that category, I'd love to talk with you. But there's the basic blocking and tackling. If you look at these long-range plans that the financial planners put together, make a number of assumptions. If I invest my money, what's my rate of return? We talked about a 9% net. That's pretty aggressive. Most of them will say, well, let's back off from that a little bit. But the most sensitive assumption, of course, is what's your lifestyle going to look like? One of my favorite meetings, I was with clients, and I was really just sitting in on the meeting because I was working as a pro bono advisor in a group of certified financial planners. They had a middle-aged couple come in, and they were putting together their plan for the first time. And the question came up, well, okay, what's your lifestyle? How much money are you going to spend each year as you get into retirement? And they said, well, we don't know. That's why we came here. Okay, well, that's fair. So how much money are you spending now? Because if you know what you're spending now, we might be able to say, okay, something is going to increase, something is going to decrease, and we can put it in a logical amount in your plan. So the husband and wife individually started making notes, and the husband said, well, I think we're spending about $7,000 a month. And the wife looked at him and said, well, I'm already at 13. So I was sitting there saying, I didn't say anything. I was trying to control my emotions. I said, these people have no idea what's happening in their financial lives. How can they possibly put together a rational plan? So while I do most of the work that I do is just helping people month to month to do the planning annually. We put together a budget for the year. This used to be just an awful experience. I remember doing budgets on big cheap tablets, on Excel spreadsheets. What a mess. And keeping track of all this stuff was just terrible. About 11 years ago, I discovered mint.com. Now, there are a number of these kinds of programs available today. Mint.com is a budgeting tool that is, I would call it semi-automatic. It almost does all of the work for you. It's sponsored by the Intuit company, TurboTax, and QuickBooks, those guys. They bought it from a startup about 15 years ago, I think. But I've been using it myself and with all of my clients. I have about 45 people on it now. And it accumulates all of your records in one place and it puts a budget together and tracks where you're going month after month. And so I ask people, do you have 5 minutes a week to spend managing your finances? That's what it takes to keep mint.com going. And then I do the rest of the work and keeping them on track. But there is an introduction to mint.com available on the Kansas City Library website. So I'd encourage you to look at that. Again, I'm a pro bono advisor. I'm available to help people to get this thing set up. If you get it set up right, and that's what you'll learn in the library presentation. But it really is a fantastic tool. And so adjusting your finances for retirement living is much more informed if you know where the starting point is. So you know in some detail where your income is coming from and where the money is going, then you're much better off, better able to predict what's really going to take in your retirement years. And again, I've got 15 years of experience in my own and a lot of the clients that I've dealt with. So I've got something to offer there. So I think that's the last. We have questions. Do we have time for questions? We've got 10 minutes or so left. If you want to contact me, there is my email. Feel free to contact me. You will not be put on any list. I don't do that kind of stuff, but I'd be happy to correspond with you, answer any questions you might have after this presentation. You want to talk about Mint, I very much encourage you to do that. I can help you set that up. And again, it's all on a pro bono basis. So that's all I have. Questions? We can go back and look at any of these
Yeah,
slides. So
hello,
yes,
can you hear me?
yes, I can.
Oh, okay. My concern is, as far as what's happening lately anyway, is do you have any suggestions as in terms of investing because of the inflation that's happening right now? I was able to get a decent return on my money years ago, investing very conservatively, where now these same conservative investments don't give me anything. So
Right.
the inflation now, I think, is up to 8–10%, something like that. So the longer I wait, the more the value of my money is going to decrease to the point where I need 2 suitcases to buy, a bar
Right. Right.
a bar of candy. So yeah, go ahead.
My guess is that you, like I, lived through the 70s.
Oh
In
yeah,
1980.
Yeah.
Inflation was 12–13%.
yeah, but the
ugly.
return on some investments, conservative investments, were also pretty good.
Right.
Now
So-
you don't have that. The return on the investments is nothing.
So let's go back to this chart. And again, we're talking in this chart, 1926 to 2019. And the light gray line here is in fact inflation. So it was negative in the 30s during the
Right.
Depression. And it bumps around a little bit, but $1 here inflated ends up being $14 after 96 years. That's about 3%, 3.1%. That's been the average inflation rate over the last 100 years. Okay. If you invested in treasury bills, you would have beaten inflation by just a little bit. If you'd invested in government bonds, long-term government bonds, inflation is 14, you're at 175. So you beat it, but it's no great shakes. If you'd invested in the stock market, the small cap, and most people don't get quite that wild, but that's a realistic number, $9,000. That's the way to beat inflation.
Right, but now the stock market, needless to say, if we've been all following the news, is I guess I'm not going to say it's crashing, but it's really going down quite a bit, and I would be leery about investing in stocks. I guess the question that I have in mind is I have some funds that I want to take a risk on, but in an industry. For example, let's just say I think solar panels are going to be the rave. And I want to invest in solar panel companies. How would I go about doing that?
So that is above my pay grade. Although what I would say is that if you would go on the library site and get my presentation, which lasts, unfortunately, 3 one-hour segments, but it's worth it, trust me. Some of those questions would be answered. I am very, very much a proponent of buying low-cost index type mutual funds and basically buying the whole market and riding it out. That's my personal philosophy. This chart is a little bit misleading because it's fine to say, well, if I had $1 in 1926 just stayed in the stock market and bought the whole market, which is what I try to do, I would have $9,000 out of $1. I mean, it's incredible. But the chart is logarithmic. They make this logarithmic just to fit it on a piece of paper. And you'll notice the difference between $1 and 10 is the same between 10 and 100 and so forth. I retired in 2007. That's what happened to the stock market in 2008. And that's almost a 50% drop. We're down about 22% now this year. The average drop in intra-year during the course of a year during this period of 96 years, 14%. So if the stock market goes down 14% during the year, I say, ho hum, that's kind of average. Now we're in what's called correction territory now, but the point is no one knows how far down it's going to go. No
Right.
one knows how long it's going to last, and no one knows how quickly it's going to recover. But the
Right.
point is, if you have the staying power, staying in, riding it out, will get you the $9,000 and will get you the 10% return. So you have to have a plan that says, I don't want to be in a position of having to sell stocks down here. Okay.
Everything that I've observed, I'm really become, I went from an optimist to putting everything together from not just the stock market, but what's happening in the world in general.
Right.
I'm very pessimistic about the future.
Well,
So
listen,
as far as stocks go, the only thing I would take a chance on is on a product that I think is going to do well. And being in that industry, investing alongside of the other, whoever it is, whether, I guess we're talking about like a limited partnership or a general partnership, something like that. And of course, there are pros and cons to that as well. But I can't singly start a company in solar and think that I'm going to do well. Besides, I don't want to be working 24 hours trying to make money.
Exactly. So the presentations that I encourage you to watch starts out with a quotation from Warren Buffett. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
He says that 95 to 98% of us should be invested in low-cost index type mutual funds, broadly diversified. Although he obviously doesn't follow that advice, he's in the 2%. But that's been my philosophy. The philosophy is you buy everything. You know you're going to have some losers, but you also know you're going to have some winners.
Right.
And predicting what's going to win and what's not is usually ends up being a fool's game. So that's a direct quote from Warren Buffett. I've heard him say it a number of times myself. So that's my philosophy. I follow Warren Buffett's advice. You didn't invest in any Bitcoin, did you?
No.
Well, there again. I mean,
well, it's gone down quite a bit, I think, right?
Yeah, about 50%.
Or did the bottom fall out?
Oh yeah, and it may. I mean, there were a lot of people who, if they sold, which some did, when it was $50. $50,000. They made a lot of money. So, but
I always tell people I was supposed to invest in gold, and I got cold feet, but I should have went ahead with it. But anyway,
well, gold has followed over the last 100 years. It's followed inflation. So but I'm not happy with that kind of rate of return.
Well, that's not bad.
What I tell people is, if you've made a lot of money in the stock market, never confuse skill with luck.
Right.
You may have just been lucky, and God bless you if you were.
I think the stock market is just that. It's the same as if you go to a casino and you gamble, because I've been in the stock market. I even recommended stocks to my dad that I was sure was going to go up.
Yeah, we'll go. Yeah,
and it went the opposite way.
Well, go to the website and view my presentation, and then you will come out of it being very optimistic about the stock market.
Okay.
That would be my hope. So
I'll take a look.
That's my challenge for you. So, other questions? That was a very good one, incidentally. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to say, if you would like to see those presentations that Mr. Hartzler mentioned, you need to go to kckpl.org, and on the front page find online programming or online programs, and go to finance, and you will see all these programs listed. And there you will see the video presentations of the programs.
Do you have a link for that by any chance?
I will have a link after we finish the program. I cannot leave right now. I should have the screen open.
Okay.
I have your emails. Your name is John.
Yeah, jpintotechno at
Uh-huh.
gmail.com.
I will send you the link.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I
And
appreciate that.
if everybody else wants to get the links, I can send you two. Does everybody else want to get the link?
Yes, I would, Marcia Cowan.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for participating in this.
Well, if you have no more questions, I'm going to stop the sharing of my screen and get back to you, Elena. So
Thank you very much for doing this.
you're welcome. This is one of the things I enjoy.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very, very helpful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have a nice afternoon. I will email you the link to our programs. And thank you again, Mr. Hartzler, for doing this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartzler, or Emerson, is it? Emerson.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.